everybody. Thank you so much for being with us for the third hour of Home Talk USA. And we are so excited that we have brought on the third hour. Greg Owens is our host for this hour. And we get to hear about all the wonderful products that are made in the USA. We get to tell you where to go and buy made in the USA. And we learn about the process of making things and manufacturing things in the USA. So, Greg, it is a pleasure to have you. Tell us what we're talking about today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Rita. And what we're going to talk about today is something that my guess is north of 90% of you have never even heard of. It's called the de minimis exception. Rita, have you ever heard of the de minimis exception?
I don't even know how to spell it, so no.
Right. So anyway, well, what you're about to hear is probably going to blow your mind because it's something that is so impactful to American manufacturers and to American consumers that it's garnered a lot of attention down in DC. And the best, it's probably the single most important thing that if it were to be resolved would be a huge boom for American businesses, American manufacturing businesses. I would estimate that our business would go up by a factor of 5 if this could be done away with. So what is this thing? Well, you've probably been on a trip overseas, maybe to Europe, come back, and when you get to the airport, they allow you to bring in a certain amount of goods duty free, right? It's an informal entry process, and there's a cap on that. It used to be $50, and then you might remember they raised it to $200, and now they've raised it to $800. And it was originally intended so that you wouldn't have this huge line at the airport coming back in, or samples of a very minimal, de minimis means minimal, value could be imported without having to go through a very expensive customs clearance formal entry form. Well, this all happened well before something called e-commerce and the internet were invented. But it has been exploited by companies engaging in e-commerce overseas to bring in their products without paying any duties. And we'll get into that a little bit further later. But it started out being exploited by companies like Amazon, who would set up warehouses on our borders and bring these packages in. But you've probably heard about a couple companies called Temu and Shein recently. These are the fast fashion companies. The kids buy it. It's cheap. You order it, you get it, and it probably falls apart. But they are almost exclusively using this. So, I mean, when was the last time you bought something on the internet that cost more than $800?
Well, all right. 2 years ago, we bought a grill. But, yeah, I get your point. You know what? I go and I specifically look for products that are not made in China. When I am buying on the internet, I've learned the hard way, if you want it to actually be a size medium, don't have it coming from China because it won't be a size medium. It'll be like, a triple extra small.
Right. That's something that we're going to talk about in a future segment. It's called COOL legislation, or country of origin labeling, which is required in stores, but it's not required on the internet, and it needs to be. So back to this de minimis thing. So how do they do it? Well, what you can do is you can set up a warehouse on the border, either in Canada or in Mexico. There's one way of doing it. You can fill that up with products, thousands of dollars worth of merchandise imported in a container, which is the cheapest way to do it. And then you simply take an order on the internet. You individually fill those orders, write it down on a handwritten or typed manifest. You show up at the border. You hand it to customs. They go, oh, everything's under $800. Stamp it and send you through.
Wow. Can
you believe it? It's happening every day. Wait till we get into the numbers. It'll boggle your mind. Other carriers such as FedEx, UPS, and DHL, Amazon have their own planes. They fly this stuff in by the plane load direct. Wow. There are logistics companies that handle e-commerce for Temu, Shein, and other foreign companies that want to sell into our market, which is the largest market in the world. They have their own airplanes, and they're flying this stuff in every day. And then they've opened it up to ocean containers, where a container can show up out in Long Beach full of $800 or less packages. And it's a list. There's no record kept of it, There's no checking of it. It is e-commerce without borders is what I like to call it.
Okay, so what can be done to control it? What can be done to get it under control?
Well, right now, it's overwhelming U.S. Customs. There's been efforts to get them to sort of start checking into it, but this is the math behind it. There are 4 million packages a day showing up at our borders. That's 1.4 billion packages a year. The estimated worth is $67 billion with a B dollars. There was an operation that Customs Border Patrol, along with ICE, did that I followed back during the Trump administration, and they started checking out mainly these e-commerce packages. And what did they find when they started, as they like to call it, popping the cans, opening the containers, opening the package? They found counterfeit merchandise. They found unsafe things like baby seats, mostly coming from companies that were established overseas. So there was no recourse. If something happened, there was nobody to sue. You'd have to get on an airplane, fly to China, and sue somebody. Good luck with that.
Yeah, no kidding.
They found, and this is what's really driving it right now, illegal drugs, particularly fentanyl, pill-making machines that are used to make, some guy can set up a pill-making shop, put some fentanyl in there with Adderall, sell it to kids thinking that they're getting an Adderall, and the next thing you know, you've lost a child. What impacts our particular company is they're using it to skirt the 301 duties that were implemented during the Trump administration. So we should have a 25% tariff levied on flatware coming into the United States. And when those duties went through, we expected our business to go way up. That did not happen. And the only explanation for that is that the folks found a workaround. And that workaround was establishing that warehouse in Canada, our friends just north of the border, filling it up with their product, bringing it in one by one, and skirting those 301 duties. And it's not just my company, of course. It's many different companies. Anybody who sells anything on the internet that their cost was under $1,800. That grill you mentioned before, that you may have paid more than $800, but remember this rule applies to the cost of it bringing it in. So we're estimating that this is costing the American taxpayers in lost duties well in excess of $10 billion with a B a year. And it's hurting. Right. Go ahead.
All right. So, I think one of the shows I would like to have you on for Invent America is how do our inventors who, are manufacturing overseas look at making sure that what they're getting in then is what they're supposed to be getting in, and that, how do they deal with it when their option is to they're tied into, they can't afford to do it here because of either supplies or the cost, but they don't want it coming in as a bad product either. Well, so is that a topic we can do?
I would, yes, it certainly is. And I would say one of the biggest risks, and certainly if Nike is exposed to it, certainly a smaller inventor that would be importing products would be exposed to, it's the one for me, one for you manufacturing thing. Okay, imagine I'm making tennis shoes in a Nike factory somewhere in China or Bangladesh. Wherever. And there, all of a sudden, a night shift shows up where they're using the same stuff to make the same pair of Nike tennis shoes. But instead of selling it to you for X amount of money, they open up their own Amazon store and they start selling around you, taking all the profits for themselves to your detriment. And that is the thing that would frighten me the most if I were to offshore a product. Either that or they're simply going to copy and steal your intellectual property.
Those are certainly things that, that we are always aware of and, try to balance out. And it's tough. It certainly is tough. So who do you have coming up on your next segments?
Oh, okay. On the next segments, I have Janet from American Blossom Linens. She is going to be joining us talking about American-made linens. And I have Matt Roberts from our company, Sherrill Manufacturing, and he's going to be talking about the challenges of taking a 2,600 employee factory down to 120 and what sort of issues he ran into and how he resolved those.
Well, that sounds wonderful. So I want to encourage everybody, learn about what it takes to be manufacturing in the U.S., the challenges, the tariffs, the taxes, the manufacturing that they still have to deal with outside of the U.S. coming in and just pounding us every day. So America, as you are out there listening, support your American made and always look at the label. And I'm sure that Greg is going to have some more information on how you bolster American inventing and production and manufacturing, and to be careful of what you buy. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being on with us for this Made in the USA segment. And we are talking about one of those really scary topics out there. And I can't even say it. Something. Anyway, Greg is with us. Yeah, Greg is with us. He is going to tell everybody what it is and why it's so important for you guys out there are buying American goods to understand there can be some real nasty stuff going on. So, Greg, fill us in.
Well, we talked a little bit about the 301 duties that were a result of Bob Lighthizer and the Trump administration coming through and putting those in, which, by the way, have been kept by the Biden administration. This isn't a partisan political issue. We'll talk about that a little later. It's just good policy. And how those tariffs were originally established to try and protect American manufacturers and level the playing field, but they are obviously this de minimis exception allowing companies to skirt them is causing a lot of harm beyond just the manufacturers. In fact, mainstream retailers like Macy's and Bed Bath & Beyond that have just basically gone out of business. Okay, imagine you're trying to sell in today's world where a lot of stuff is bought online and you're having to pay duties and these online companies do not. It gives them a huge advantage right out of the blocks. And it's something that mainstream retailers, not just those big box brands and big box stores that I just talked about, but mom and pop boutique type stores get hit with the full bore. And their friends over at Amazon and Temu and Shein and other, Facebook, they all get they get a free lunch. So who are the winners out of this in terms of, why is this thing still around? Well, obviously, those big carriers, the FedEx, UPS, DHL, who are making billions of dollars off shipping charges, bringing this stuff over, they're making billions of dollars themselves. They're fighting tooth and nail to keep these things in place. In fact, Amazon at one point wanted to open up the de minimis exception to free trade zones, which it's excluded from now because it's only the first import into the United States. So we've successfully blocked that. And the other companies in cohort with Amazon are the Chinese manufacturers that are now skipping that American brand that they depended on before to reach the American customer. And they're just making up a brand and putting it on Amazon or putting it somewhere else online, using de minimis to skirt the tariffs, and they're bringing the stuff in free of charge.
Well, I think that, as the father of Home Talk USA would say, our dear Father Michael King, it's like, buy American because it's better, when you've got, two products and one's made in the USA and one is not, wherever else it's made, usually the quality of that is awful. 2 or 3 washings where something else will last for years. And, when you really look at the value of your money, because if you're looking at, 2 products and you say, oh, well, this one is, 50% less. If it doesn't last, you haven't saved any money. And I think that's a big thing that the consumers look at. And I think that's a big thing that they miss. It's just crazy. And when you look at, you've got a pair of shoes that would have lasted for 5 years. Now you've got a pair of shoes that lasts 5 months. And they both have the same brand on them.
I always like to, when you're presenting something like this that's a little bit scary, and quite honestly, it's a negative thing, finish it up with some good news. And the good news is this: 5 years ago, when we started going down to D.C. and lobbying against this crazy self-imposed free trade agreement, nobody in Congress knew what we were talking about. They looked at us like we had three heads. Now, almost everyone in Congress is familiar with this issue. Sadly, because of the impact that it's had not only on manufacturing, but on thousands of deaths that are occurring as a result of these illegal drugs pouring in undetected through the de minimis loophole. The IP that has been stolen is really just completely made the 301 duties a non-factor. So a coalition built of domestic manufacturers and organizations representing those who have lost loved ones due to fentanyl and poisonings is what we're calling it. It's not a fentanyl overdose. No one intentionally takes fentanyl. It's being used, it's being put in drugs unknowingly, and these poor folks are actually being poisoned, which is something that I learned by being on this coalition. So we're fighting back hard, and there are actually two bills that have made it through Congress that would eliminate the de minimis loophole for any product that's under the 301 duties, which would get rid of about 60% of it.
Amazing.
It's co-introduced by Republicans and Democrats, so it's a bipartisan bill. It's bicameral, meaning it's in the House and the Senate. So the legislation, it's not perfect. It's not what we want. We would like to just hands up do away with it. But it's a great first step in getting something on the books that's going to reduce it and allow customs to begin doing their job to a greater extent and protect the American people. It'll allow Treasury to get back some of the billions of dollars that we're losing in tariffs and duties, and really start to reverse this trend. Mostly, it will help American manufacturers level the playing field and start adding jobs and reversing what has been a couple decades of communities being destroyed. So, at the end, kudos to Sherrod Brown and Marco Rubio in the Senate. I mean, who could think of two individuals who are probably at further extremes on the aisle than those two guys? They got together on this bill and they want to do something about it. There's a representative in Congress, Blumenauer, who has been spearheading the effort on the House side to get this done. And he's teamed up with Murphy and Duncan. They actually got it through Ways and Means markup, which is a huge success. And I don't know that if it's going to actually pass during this Congress. We're in an election year, and that can make things a little goofy. But we look forward to either passing it this Congress or next Congress and starting to reverse the trend and end what really amounts to a self-imposed free trade agreement that we're the only ones participating in it. Our limit's $800. Guess what the limit is in China for de minimis going the other direction?
What is it?
$7.
Aha. There you go. Let's have some actual balance in world trade. Would be nice, wouldn't it?
Right. So if anyone out there is interested in this issue, it's as simple as picking up your phone and calling and talking to your congressman or sending him an email and telling him you want to get rid of de minimis because it's hurting our taxpayers, it's hurting our businesses, and it's killing our children. And we need to end it now.
We do. And I think you were right when you started that most people don't even know it's out there. And so, being able to share and, my guy, Mike would always say, what is the call to action? All right. So, get in touch with your congressman, your senator, and tell them how you feel about this really unbalanced trade war that's out there. And Greg, if you shoot me over something that we can put in a newsletter, we'll send it out to all of our guys in a newsletter.
I will be happy to do that.
All right. You gave me my call to action and I gave you yours.
All right. Thank you, Rita.
Excellent. All right, everyone, stick with us for the next segment of Made in America, because you know what? We all need it desperately.
welcome back to this edition of Home Talk USA. This is Greg Owens, aka the Made in America guy, and we're here with segment 3 with one of our makers, someone who actually makes something in the United States. Janet Wischnia is with us from American Blossom Linens. She's a third-generation co-owner of Thomaston. Did I say that correctly, Janet?
Correct.
No.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which started in 1899. It's a family-owned USA linens manufacturer. She founded American Blossom Linens, bedding and home goods, sourced and located from that factory. And you sent me a lot of other information on your background, but I think our listeners would probably rather hear that from you than from me. So let's try and include a lot of that in our chat. So welcome to the program, Janet.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Expand a little bit on the history of American Blossom Linens, how you got involved in this business. Obviously, it's a family-type business. And, the events leading you up to where you are today.
Okay, so how we have 10 minutes. Do you want the longer version, the shorter version?
Longer version.
The longer. Let's do the 5-minute version. All right.
Okay.
All right. Our business was actually started in 1931 by my grandfather, who came from Russia to the U.S. We eventually bought Thomaston Mills, which was also a family business started in 1899. But the story really begins with my grandfather. So he had been in the linen business when he was in Russia. And he moved here, he got married, he had a family, and he started his own retail store selling linens in the center of Philadelphia. And he grew that business. He had 3 sons. My father was one of them. And they went to the University of Pennsylvania, and they all studied business. They graduated, and they came into the family business. And they ended up growing it more. They had one retail store. They opened up another retail store. And when I was born, I think my dad decided he didn't really like working 7 days a week anymore. Because it was, it was even, retail's intense. Obviously, there was no internet then. It was all brick and mortar. And he started thinking about other ways to change the business. So after a couple of years and a lot of brainstorming, they decided that they were going to start selling B2B. So they started selling to cruise lines and government agencies and hospitals and hotels. So eventually that business grew bigger than the retail business. And at that point in time, they closed the retail stores. They took the one that was in Center City and made it an office building and started to grow their, call it a wholesale business, because at that time they weren't manufacturing. They were buying from other manufacturers. It was, of course, strictly in the USA because this was the 1960s and 70s. Then, my father had kids. I grew up. My father said, "You're really good at business. You should go into the family business." I was the oldest of all the cousins and my siblings as well. And he said, "You should go into the business." And like every good female teenager, I said, "No, I don't want to do that. I want to do my own thing. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to school to study anthropology," which I did. I went to the University of Pennsylvania. And I got to my senior year and I was, well, what am I going to do now? I have to make a living. And my then boyfriend, who became my husband, said, "Why don't you go into the family business?" And I said, "What a great idea."
They're ganging up on you.
Yeah. So, well, of course, when my father said I'd be good at it, I didn't listen. When my boyfriend said, it was a whole different story.
Right.
And so I graduated, and 2 weeks later, I started in the business. I had been working there in summers pretty much my whole life. I had all of my summers jobs had been working in the business, so I was very familiar with it. So I started working in the business. I kind of started from scratch at the bottom in customer service. I grew into sales. And the business over the years grew, and we started selling more and more bed sheets. And it came to a point where we decided we really should have our own brand. So we started to contract with a company called Thomaston Mills, and they would make sheets under our brand name, and we would sell them to our customers. And we got so big at that they decided we were competition for them and that they didn't want to make for us anymore. And we then bought our own factory. And by that point in time, I was already grown. I had kids, and my husband, the one who told me I should go into business, was actually also working at the family business as well. So he was very talented mechanically, and he was put in charge of opening up our new factory. And we ended up getting a building in Elkton, Virginia, which was not far from Harrisonburg, sort of south of Washington, D.C. It was an old Wrangler plant. And we bought equipment, and we started our own plant. And that became big, and we started to outgrow the building. And, we were kind of looking for other ways to get a bigger building and expand. At the same time, all of the textile manufacturing was really, in the 1980s going overseas. All the retailers started sourcing things overseas, and Thomaston Mills was not in very good financial shape. They had a lot of retail accounts, and the retail accounts all kind of went overseas to buy. So Thomaston Mills went into bankruptcy, and we then bought their plant out of bankruptcy. It was a much bigger plant, and we bought their name because they had a better brand name than we did, and that's how we became Thomaston Mills.
Well, that's
we've owned it ever since.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating.
This was in 2001 that we bought it.
Yeah, a lot of parallels to the history of our company in that legacy brand, that company that goes back 100 years in time, and then failed or sort of collapsed during the offshoring process, and you guys picked up the pieces and made a business out of it. So what's your product mix now? Do you sell still to a lot of B2B, or is it mainly retail, or what's the mix?
No, actually the B2B side still is the bigger side. In 2001 we had no retail. We were still B2B. So we were very big in the hospitality and healthcare trade. We didn't start retail till 2019. 2019.
And how do you, in the face of what I'm assuming is some pretty stiff price competition from overseas, compete with the overseas product in that B2B space?
We do a lot of custom work. A lot of hotels want their own branding. They want their own sizes, but they don't really want to carry the inventory.
I'm sure there's a lot of hopefully makers out there listening to us, maybe some inventors that we picked up from Rita's program. What advice would you give to somebody who's trying to make a go of it in American manufacturing today?
I would say, it's not easy, but starting any business is hard. I would say just keep at it and be dogged about it. Just keep trying, and you find a way. There's a lot of opportunity all around, and there's a lot of people that still have skills that you can find that can help you. In my journey to build the retail business, I've met a lot of other small manufacturers who we've begun to work with that we didn't even know of.
And how important is that Made in America label on your product, especially in the B2C space?
Very important. It's very important. People are looking for it. Yeah.
Right. And I'm one of those people. Are you one of those people?
I am. I definitely am. I look for other, I feel like I have to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Okay, well, Janet, thank you so much for being on the program. I hope everybody found that interesting. I do. It's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful legacy. And remind us once again where we find your beautiful linens.
Sure. It's AmericanBlossomLinens.com.
AmericanBlossomLinens.com.
Linens.
Go give it a
Right.
visit. I think you're going to enjoy them as much as I did. Well, that wraps it up for this segment of the Made in America show. We will be back shortly with Matt Roberts from Sherrill Manufacturing, and we're going to talk a little bit about scaling manufacturing down so that you can rebuild it going into the future. We'll be back shortly. Thank you. Welcome back to Home Talk USA. This is Hour 3, the Made in America Hour. I'm Greg Owens, a.k.a. the Made in America guy. And today, for our final segment, I have a guy that I've known for quite a few years. His name is Matt Roberts. He's co-founder, along with me, of Sherrill Manufacturing. He's our president. Matt helped found the company back in 2005 when Oneida Limited decided to ship their manufacturing overseas. Matt holds degrees in engineering from both Clarkson University and Syracuse University, where he received an MBA. Matt lives in Oneida with his wife, Alice, 3 children, Andrew, Eric, and Mallory. Matt, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for the invitation. Good to see you again.
Yes, although on the radio. So after that brief introduction, let's talk a bit about how you got involved in flatware manufacturing. I believe you were designing radar systems, and there's an interesting story, at least I always found it interesting, about how you made that transition into something that is quite a bit more low tech in a lot of people's minds than radar manufacturing. But go ahead, Matt.
Sure. So I grew up in Oneida, New York, went to Oneida High School, and like you said, I got a couple degrees in electrical engineering, and I worked for General Electric out of high school, and GE Aerospace encompassed a number of locations. One was in Utica, New York. The other is in Syracuse. The one in Syracuse is now called Lockheed Martin. It's changed hands a few times. So I knew people that worked at Oneida Limited. I had never been in the factory. And what happened in the mid-'80s with Ronald Reagan as our president, Mr. Gorbachev tore down the wall, and we didn't have that big Russian bear to fight us anymore. So there was a considerable consolidation in the aerospace industry, and the Utica location was closed. So I had a couple options, one of which was to go to Minneapolis, work for GE Med Systems and make MRIs. But I wanted to stay in the area. My family was in the area, and I knew the CEO of Oneida Limited. His name was Bill Matthews. And Bill got me an interview, as CEOs can do, and I interviewed as an engineer for Oneida Limited. So walking in the door, the funny thing was I thought to myself, how hard could it be to make a spoon, a fork, or a knife? I was making passive infrared systems, top secret clearance stuff. It can't be that hard. Well, I went in and I interviewed and went through the factory, and I could not believe the complexity that it takes to make a fork, knife, or spoon, any of those. It's actually a lot more complex than making a radar. A lot of our stuff was outsourced, and we put it together in Utica. So I was so intrigued with the facility. And the other thing that I noticed was most of the management was a lot older than me in the factory. Some of them were my father's age, others, a number of years older than me. And I thought to myself, you know what? I could run this place someday. So I started in 1991, and by the time the factory closed, I was running the factory. Unfortunately, 6 months into that deal, I was brought over into the administration building, and they told me that due to Chinese competition, we're going to close the factory. So that's sort of how I got to where I was in 2004.
Okay, so it is a little bit more complicated than most people think to make a knife, fork, or spoon. A lot of people probably think that there's this machine and you pour metal into it and boom, out the other end pops a knife, fork, or spoon. So tell us a little bit about how forks and spoons are made, and then some of our hollow handle and solid monoblock knives.
Right. So you can't, and that's why a lot of developing countries, you can make flatware with a low-tech type of process where you put people on a single machine and then they polish the piece one at a time by hand. Very labor intensive, does not work in the United States. It worked in China in the 1990s and early 2000s. But the reason that Oneida Limited was the last flatware manufacturer and that we inherited, and now we're the last flatware manufacturer in the United States, is that they did a lot of things via efficiency, and pieces per hour, per person, per man hour, were a lot higher, were way higher than the rest of the world. So normally, what you would do for a fork and a spoon, the process is very similar. You start out with a coil of steel. Think of a clock spring, only it's made out of stainless steel. It can vary in thickness from 87 thousandths all the way up to 135 thousandths, which is pretty thick. We cut that into what we call a blank. It looks like a little paintbrush. And then the next process, I call it just like making Christmas cookies, only you're making them out of stainless steel. So we roll the pieces and cut them. We stamp the handles and we bend the bowls in tines. And then that is done in a coining press. You can do about 5,000 pieces per hour. And then the rest of the process is an automated edging and finishing process, whereby you put anywhere from 10 to 30 pieces in one rack. So each time you cycle the machine, 30 pieces are being made. And that's really where the efficiencies come out, and where we can make a lot more pieces per man hour than anyone else in the world.
So automation here is the key. And the knife process is a completely different animal, and perhaps we're going to come back and talk about that on some other day. But very briefly, we have about a minute left. If you could talk a little bit about the transition from taking a factory that once had 2,600 employees and trying to reinvent that process with the same equipment that cranked it out by the tens of thousands to making 200 or 300 piece runs.
So that's where the difficult part came. The sizes now might be 20,000 sizes that are only like 300 pieces. So what we have to do is we have to consolidate all the runs into one, so that we're not doing as many setups. So it's really basically doing things like minimizing setup times. We start doing that.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Matt, for being with us today. We're going to have to bring you back at some other point in time to talk a little bit more about that minimum run size issue and how we designed our flatware to be so similar that it could be run sort of back to back, minimizing the setup impact on total cost. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today on the Made in America Hour. We'll be back again in 2 weeks with more guests talking to the makers, the shakers, and the patriots who keep it made in the USA. Thank you very much.